Hello and welcome all you artists, art lovers, and YouTube aficionados. You have reached Painting with Taylor Kubicek once again, but I am not in the art studio today. I am here with my good friend, Drew Kimble, who is a professional architectural and commercial photographer, but he's also just an expert in all things photography. We are here at his studio, 1281 Photography. 1281 Photography.
Yes.
And we are going to be talking about shooting our paintings by ourselves. So if you have some knowledge of photographing your own artwork or none at all, he's going to give us his expert opinion and some good tips on how we can do it. So, Drew, a lot of artists, painters in particular, they don't have a major photography background. Everyone now has a cell phone, which is pretty simple to use and take photographs of your artwork. But is there a specific camera setup you recommend?
So I'll talk about cell phone usage first, because it is very easy. We all have one. The trouble is, I was talking to somebody about shooting product photos the other day with their cell phone. Depending on what color that product is or painting, your cell phone is going to be automatically trying to color balance. So then each one is going to come out a little bit different.
It makes sense.
You won't have consistency because each picture or product is going to be a different color.
That's
and so you run into a lot of issues like that. So people that photograph or scan paintings regularly will quite often, like the really high-end ones, will use a full format 4x5 camera with a scanner on the back. That scanner is thousands of dollars and it plugs right into a computer. There's typically no SD card that goes into it. It's like connected to an iMac or a Mac Pro or something like that. And it takes an extremely high resolution image of that painting. And why they would use a 4x5 is because you can change all the planes. So to get that painting completely square, the way you need it to be, you can set your tripod up square, you can get your painting hanging square, but to get even more minute detail and adjustment on there, the camera itself can do all of that work there. So you have very little to do in post when you do that. And that's maybe the most ideal place to go with it, but that also costs a lot of money.
Sure.
And we don't all have a lot of money to buy a full format camera to scanner these days. So my thought would be, you're going to want to look for something with a 50 millimeter lens or longer. And I say 50 millimeter because the 50 millimeter lens at about 3.5 feet is very similar to what the eye sees at about 3.5 feet. It's a very natural look. You don't have a lot of distortion or anything else like that. So you want to look for that 50 millimeter or so lens. And, a 36 megapixel to 50 megapixel sensor would be good. Like we were looking at your paintings today, when I was looking up close at it, there's, not tons of texture, but there's still texture there that makes up part of the work itself. You want to make sure that you have enough resolution to capture that texture so you're not losing, that's a personality of the painting, of the piece.
Absolutely.
You're going to lose that.
And as artists, we don't want to lose that. That goes into the work. Okay, so what you're saying is there's an affordable option out there. Is this what you consider a DSLR or a little more than that?
I would say, there's no quality difference between a DSLR or a mirrorless camera or anything. You're kind of splitting hairs at that point. Mirrorless is kind of the cool thing right now. And there may be other things that are different, but what I've been told is, especially for longer exposures, you have fewer things happening inside of the mirrorless, specifically just a shutter working rather than a mirror coming up.
Gotcha.
So you're cutting down the amount of shake.
Yeah.
But that's also really splitting hairs. So, it's a very small amount of shake that happens. But maybe something to consider if you're photographing really nice, large, high-end paintings. You want to have as little movement as possible. So, the mirrorless is just going to have that shutter actuation.
I understand. Okay, so what are the ideal lighting conditions that I should look for? And I know in my own experience, there's conditions that are different for a painting that's lighter and darker. If a painting has a lot of dark colors, the lighting conditions can really vary, and I deal with glare a lot. So how do I reduce that? What are the best scenarios there?
Well, that's a tricky question to answer simply. Previously, like some of the other paintings I've photographed, a bit smaller than this one. It's a lot of painting. It's a lot of painting. I was able to take a very large and a very soft box that was actually bigger than the painting itself. And it was flat as opposed to what we use today, which was round. And I laid that thing flat on the ground, hung the light above me. It was able to shoot directly down toward the painting itself. Probably not the most ideal way to do it, but at the time I thought, let's give it a whirl. Anyway, because the softbox is actually bigger than the painting itself, and it was flat, that light was coming out of there pretty flat. Whereas the light today, we had a highlight because we were shooting the big round umbrella. And so that worked for that painting. There also was not a lot of texture on it. So we didn't have to worry about highlights and shadows quite as much because it was pretty flat. I just needed consistent lighting across it. However, today, when we started shooting each panel separately, I brought in that big 6-foot umbrella with a black back on it. So we pushed all the light forward, so you have light bouncing around. We had a highlight up on top. And I think it was because the light's so round, it's kind of hitting it in a round way. Yeah, the top of your painting is talking about the reflection that we're reflection, dealing with a reflection on this painting. Right. So in this case, I think we could have, if we want, like we're really wanting to use a strobe on it, there's a couple of different solutions I had. However, what we ended up doing was flagging off the lights from my window, setting it down on a black, my background was already black wall, and then black sheet. And I set the camera for my base ISO 100. Then my f-stop was 5.6. And we did a 25-second exposure. So it was a very long exposure. But once we got all the light flagged off and everything else, we had extremely even light. And the studio was pretty dark. I turned off my lights and stuff, so you're running just a very little bit of ambient light to get that in there. So I made sure and used my off-camera light meter to make sure we were metering the correct color, which is very important for replication. Did the 25-second exposure, made sure we were completely level on all planes. And then when you were switching out panels, I took the opportunity to zoom in and make sure we had a lot of that texture in there still that was, since we didn't have light coming in this way or up or down or some other thing, it was very flat light. And I wanted to make sure we still had the ability to see that texture in there. So for this one, because it was so big and because you had a ton of dynamic, your painting at the bottom is very dark, and at the top it's very, very bright. And so trying to light that and get it even without blowing out the top or losing the bottom, I think the solution was flagging off a lot of external light and doing a long exposure. So if we're dealing with a lot of areas that we might have reflectivity, long exposure, and a darker space, I've actually had really good experience in the past with lighter paintings, not darker paintings. But some of the best times I've ever had were on a snowy day. I've taken the painting and I've set it out on the side, hung it on a fence or something. And when there's a ton of snow on the ground and it's plenty bright, as long as there's no real dark areas in the painting, it just fully illuminates everything. And it just worked great. So is that something you could probably replicate for lighter paintings in the studio or just in your house? I think what you could do with that to create your own indoor snowy scene would be an indoor snow globe. Yeah, basically an indoor snow globe. If you can do that, it'd be perfect. Are we done with video now? We solved all the problems. Indoor snow globe, let's go. This is actually very similar to what I told this guy the other day when we were talking about photographing products. Got two, you could do something as simple as 2 bed sheets, like 2 singles, put your lights there if you're in a shoot with strobes or a solid light like a ring light or something else. So you make it really soft. And And then you could even put a white sheet in the front of the camera, cut a hole in it, put your lens through it. So all light is kind of bouncing around everywhere off that white sheet, and it's very, very soft. So you're getting extremely consistent from the left side, the right side, and the front. And if you wanted to go like really, really far, you could even put something white over the top. Granted, you'd have to have some light stands or something else to
Essentially a tint.
But yeah, you're creating a white tint that filters all the light through, letting it be extremely even, which is what you get on a snowy day. You've got light coming down from the sun's hitting the snow, it's bouncing it back up everywhere, and everything is very reflective. So you're getting just big, soft light from every angle.
That seems like a doable solution for a lot of people in any size space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it doesn't have to be big by any means.
I like that. What about light meters? Do you think those are essential? Or color check, or is it color checker?
Yeah, the color meter.
Color meter.
I think so. So as an architectural photographer or any work that I do, I'll take that color meter along. So I have a really great reading of what my ambient color is, whether it's, if I'm out on location in a space in a building that has a lot of like artificial light and a ton of natural light coming through, finding the happy medium in there for what I need to be exposing for, or what I need to set my camera's Kelvin temperature for. So in post, I'm consistently getting that same line. So, today I think we were at 6,000 kelvins because of the window light coming through. And it would be way more difficult, if you had more blue light or more warm light, cool warm light, to try to keep your colors pure in your painting. So some people trust auto white balance. As I've gone, I've trusted it less and less, because you're kind of, for many elements within that picture, your camera's trying to figure out like what should your color look like from this area? What should your color look like for this zone? What should your color look like for this zone? As your light's hitting it. And so you may end up having like your color may be just way off, very mixed up, very soupy and strange. So that color meter will give you a definitive baseline to work from. And since having it, wouldn't go back. It's a great tool to have.
So, I guess really that just leads post production, right? So editing. What do you recommend for editing? Photoshop, obviously.
So if you're doing something like you're doing, I think Photoshop is great, because you're gonna have to stitch that thing together one way or the other, whether you've extracted from whatever else is left on the fringes from the background and then have it photo merged, or if you go through it, stitch it together yourself. I prefer to use like the contrast, clarity, and color enhancing in Lightroom first and foremost. Then I would take it into Photoshop, extract it, and then have it one way or the other, whether you do it automatically or manually, have it stitched together from that point.
Gotcha.
Is what I would do.
And of course, when you're saving an image, you probably want to save it the largest format possible, the largest rendering.
So what I generally do, especially if I'm working with multiple layers, which you would be if you're photo merging or even stitching it together, I save it in a TIFF format or a Photoshop format, and I put that in one folder. Then I'll save it in a JPEG format. Or, if your printer is requesting a different file type, just make sure you have your raw format or your larger format, your TIFF, your Photoshop, PSD file, your JPEG, and then maybe whatever else they want. Because the JPEG, the printer wants, the JPEG will actually, I didn't realize this, will degrade over time.
A JPEG will degrade over time?
Degrade over time.
Really?
So you'll end up losing quality in it. Especially depending on the external hard drive or whatever hard drive you have it stored on, it's just going to break down. And so storing it in a TIFF file, .tiff, or the PSD will, it has much more longevity. It'll survive much, much longer. So everything I do, I'll save it first and foremost in the TIFF file, a specific TIFF folder, and then I'll save the other one, JPEG, in a specific JPEG folder for whatever size that client needs it done.
Well, Drew, thank you for your time and all this information. I think it's been really helpful to painters, mostly painters, but probably also some photographers out there. So if you are a painter or a photographer, I hope you enjoyed this. Please like and subscribe to this channel, and I will see you on the next video.